Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining this relatively late stream for today due to some technical stuff. And as always, dear friends, I will share a news segment at first, and after news segment, let's have a little community chat for 15, 20, 30 minutes. I have prepared quite a number of news on some major developments, but before I start, let me make a little announcement, which is that due to some technical issues, I would not be able to do updates tomorrow and maybe day after tomorrow. So I'm basically taking 2 day offs, but then I will come back with more content, and hopefully that new content will be also interesting. I will try my best, and so yes, that is the announcement, dear friends. If tomorrow or day after anybody will ask in the comment sections where is Levan, why he is not doing updates, well, that's technical offs, by the way, for possibly today, but for sure tomorrow I would not be able to make updates. That being said, dear friends, let's go through some news now. And as I said, there is quite a number of important developments are happening and a lot to unpack. And first of all, let me give you this report that according to Russian Defense Ministry, Russian Armed Forces liberated settlement of Novator in a DPR. Let me show you on the map this area. So this is Novator settlement, a breakthrough, basically, of Russian troops right in between Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration and Konstantinovka directions. And also, according to number of reports, Russian armed forces finalized clearing operation in Sherbinovka settlement, which is also under full Russian control. Probably either later on today or tomorrow, Russian Defense Ministry will confirm this information. Also, and in addition to that, dear friends, let me give you an update on Pokrovsk itself. Videos are circulating on internet about Russian DRGs operating inside the Pokrovsk itself. Kiev regime's militants themselves actually published video when their group of Kiev regime's militants on a vehicle end up in an ambush inside the Pokrovsk city. So one may argue that offensive on Pokrovsk even already has started, and at the same time Russian armed forces improved their position in Pokrovsk direction, and their significant part of Zvereva settlement is under Russian control now. It's divided now, contested between the two sides. So significant progress, by the way. I watched myself this video, and I was not too surprised that Russian DRGs are operating inside the Pokrovsk itself, but nevertheless, it is important news to pay attention to. I believe many military experts are predicting that before end of this summer, Russian armed forces probably will either completely encircle Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration or might even achieve a total collapse of Kiev regime's defense lines in this area and actually liberate both those cities. In addition, TASS news agency is also reporting, based on Russian Defense Ministry's data, that in previous 24 hours, Kiev regime's forces on all the sectors of the front line lost more than 1,100 military personnel, almost 1,200. Obviously, significant number of losses, and this is happening on daily basis. Also, dear friends, Russian armed forces during the last time conducted long-range precise strikes on military and logistical infrastructure of the Kiev regime, on military industrial complex that is engaged in weapons production. And according to reports, explosions were heard in Odessa, Kiev, Dnipropetrovsk, and a number of other directions. In addition to that, even though in yesterday's second update I mentioned this news, but I think it's worth our attention again, because seems like appetite of Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky definitely has no boundaries, by the way. And if yesterday media was reporting that Kiev regime is demanding $6 billion this year, then and I report about it, then today I saw this news, by the way, which is originally published by Reuters, that Kiev regime is demanding 120 billion, by the way, $120 billion for next year. I don't even know how to comment on this. Clearly, these criminals have no their appetite, by the way, when it comes to money. I mean, they have no boundaries, sir. They are demanding more, and more, and unfortunately, it is highly likely that if not 120 billion, then at least a couple of dozens of billions will be allocated by NATO member states to further prolong this proxy war against Russia. RT is also reporting that same time Zelensky is complaining that Western backers are too slow when it comes to money transfers. He is in a hurry, by the way. He knows his days are numbered in the office of president in Ukraine, and one might argue that he wants to use this time to steal as much as possible. So he wants more money, right? He's he's not satisfied with whatever billions he had already stolen, and as I said, I mean, they want 120 billion, by the way, right, for next year, and at least 6 billion this year, right now. Unbelievable. So let's go through some details here. Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky has complained that his country has yet to see any benefits from NATO's plan to ramp up military spending. At the recent summit in The Hague, most members of the US-led bloc committed to raising security-related expenses to 5% of GDP. Kiev seeks to benefit from the surge, even as reluctance to commit to long-term funding of Ukraine is dwindling in the West. EU has opened access to 150 billion euro. Member states can assume obligations to draw these funds and then transfer them to Kiev regime. Zelensky told Ukrainian ambassadors on Monday, according to remarks released by his office, 10 countries have already expressed a readiness to take this money, but we have not yet seen the result that they have actually taken it and transferred it to us. Dear friends, you share your take. What you think? This is, I mean, truly like next level of madness, isn't it? That is happening right now. I don't know. They are talking about tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars and euros of American or European taxpayers' money if this is nothing whatsoever. And unfortunately, societies in the collectivist countries are so deep in a sleep or so much indoctrinated in this anti-Russian propaganda in Russia hate that seems like majorities don't even care at this point. I don't know, man. You share your take, but this is a huge amount of money for any country, by the way, and even for richest countries in this world. I mean, 120 billion, 150 billion euro. It is big sums, right? And well, Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky is not happy that billions are late. They want these billions yesterday. But anyways, to continue, dear friends, I mentioned this news yesterday that Zelensky, during his one of the latest speeches, basically hinted on the long-range strikes deep into Russian territory. He kind of demanded from Kiev regime's militaries to strike all over the Russia. And I think this statement of Zelensky is definitely related to threats that we are seeing nowadays from collective West countries when it comes to topic of long-range strikes. I remind you that a couple of days ago, U.S. acting general threatened to annihilate Kaliningrad region. Then German general also called for long-range strikes deep into Russian territory. I remind you, dear friends, that allegedly, during their last conversation, Trump was exercising with Zelensky possibilities of strikes, long-range strikes on Moscow and St. Petersburg. There are many reports that U.S. might send significant number of ATACMS tactical missiles, also potentially JASSM cruise missiles that have a range in certain variations up to 800, even 1,000 kilometers. So Germany requested from US Typhoon launchers that will allow Russian enemies, if deployed, to launch Tomahawk missiles with a range of up to 2,000 kilometers. So clearly there is too many indicators in place that globalist controlled regimes in collective West and their proxy regime is preparing themselves for potential large-scale combined drone and missile strikes deep into Russian territory, including towards St. Petersburg, Moscow, and other cities that are hundreds of kilometers away from a line of contact. And Zelensky is basically hinting on this possibility. I have no doubts that Russian militaries are paying close attention to all these developments, and all the necessary countermeasures are taken. Also, while threatening Russia on daily basis, collective West and their proxy regime is same time is engaged in this game of negotiations. Even though globalists and their puppet regimes definitely are not yet ready to acknowledge their defeat in this proxy war against Russia. So therefore, I have no doubts that all these talks about ceasefire or negotiations are just part of their game plan, part of deception. They want ceasefire to basically give some break to Kiev regime and its forces. We all know that, but nevertheless, there was 2 rounds of talks in Istanbul that was, I will say, partially successful due to humanitarian aspect of it, right? And we have today this report that Zelensky announces date of next Russia-Ukraine talks that most likely would not be successful in terms of military de-escalation, but may actually produce some results in terms of, yet again, humanitarian aspect. So the next round of direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine will take place in Turkey on Wednesday. That is tomorrow. Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky announced in a video statement on Telegram. And even though officially Russian side did not yet confirm that tomorrow there will be talks in Istanbul, we have this report from RIA Novosti that Russia and Ukraine will have to discuss some difficult topics, according to Peskov. Let me give you some details. So Russia and Ukraine will have to discuss complex topics at the talks, including draft memorandums on their settlement, said the presidential press secretary Dmitry Peskov. And we have quotes here. The topic of negotiations is quite complex. In addition to other issues, of course, it will be necessary to discuss those very draft memorandums that were exchanged during their second round. And we all know that these memorandums are like from 2 different universes. Kiev regime and their Western assets are acting as if they are in a position to demand anything whatsoever, while Russia actually is in position to have its terms, right? And that's exactly what happened in case of Russian memorandum. And one would hope that collective West and their proxy regime would listen and take Russian offer, but unfortunately this is not going to happen. Not now. Unfortunately, there is too many indicators that globalist controlled regimes in collective West countries are preparing ground for massive escalation on unprecedented scale that probably we will witness right after this 50-day ultimatum of Donald Trump, US president, will expire, which is going to happen in about 35 days, isn't it? And on the topic of this Istanbul talks, press spokesman of the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, also stated that there should not be expectations of some magical breakthrough during these talks, which is yet again understandable until Western so-called elites or Western ruling class will be put in its place and will be forced to actually come to their senses or acknowledge objective reality no one should expect any breakthroughs when it comes to final resolution of this crisis. Unfortunately, as I said, me personally quite sure that we will witness unprecedented scale of escalation, potentially with even limited, if I may say this way, limited direct clashes or direct strikes between Russia and NATO countries. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. I'm afraid this is a possibility at this point, and only after that, when Russia will actually retaliate big time against hostile entities, probably we will begin seeing real steps being taken towards de-escalation by Western ruling class. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen now or tomorrow, because yet again, Western elites are not yet ready to acknowledge objective reality, to face their truth, right? And dear friends, before I continue, I have a lot of important news left, of course. But before I continue, let me notice that this media project exists only as long as it has your assistance, your support. So if you like my work, if you want to see potential further development of this project, please consider to support my work. You can do it through several means, through PayPal platform or Boosty platform. If you want to donate, you can subscribe to my Patreon and the Boosty pages, where I have extra content on quite regular basis. Finally, yesterday I was able to publish extra on Patreon and Boosty after a week pause due to, first of all, health issues. I caught a virus, nasty virus. Many of you know, by the way. I was barely able to make these programs, isn't it? And then was the weather, by the way. There was weather issues also. Today, weather people promised rain all day, but I did not see drop of rain until now, at least in this part of Moscow. But nevertheless, I have extra content on my Patreon and Boosty on regular basis, as my thank to all the members of communities there for their support. So you can subscribe on Patreon if you can. You can use a crypto, by the way, for support, and during the live streams you can use super chat feature on a Rumble channel to donate, and also you can become premium subscriber on Rumble. Everything counts, of course. Everything is a great support, and many thanks to everybody who already helped and continues to support to maintain this project and continue this work. Thank you all, dear friends. And that's been said, let's continue. Let's continue with some more news. And as I said, there are quite a lot to unpack. And for example, we have this report that I mentioned in yesterday's second update, that UK has delivered air defense systems and artillery shells worth $200 million to Kyiv regime out of $940 million planned assistance for this year. In addition, when it comes to UK, by the way, I have to mention this news that after 35 days and $11,000, which is maybe not much, but news itself is a big deal, I think. So after 35 days and $11,000 in a parking fee, their malfunctioning British F-35B from, I believe, Prince Wales aircraft carrier wing group finally took off from India. This plane was parked in one of the India's airports due to malfunction, and 35 days, by the way, it took for engineers to put this plane in working condition. At some point, even news began circulating that engineers are unable to sort out the issues with the plane, and they were planning to disassemble plane and took it in parts. But I guess somehow they managed to work out what the issue was. And this is a clear example, dear friends, why Western equipment is not as effective as it is advertised, right? Because Western military industrial complexes for decades and decades and decades, by the way, are operating in this cringe way, corrupt way, I will say, when they are over-engineering almost everything because they are making big buck, not just on sales of the weapons, but also on maintenance of these extremely over-engineered weapon systems. And that's why they are pursuing these policies, by the way. They are over-engineering stuff because they are making more money on maintenance than on sales itself, right? And their F-35 is, I mean, clearest demonstration of that, isn't it? So yes, finally, after 35 days, somehow engineers managed to sort out what the hell was wrong with the plane. Not for long, I guess, not for long. But dear friends, to continue, there are much more important news than that, which is that US deploys B6112 nuclear bombs to UK for the first time since at least 2008, according to media reports. And I spoke about this topic yesterday, but I think this is very important stuff and worth mentioning, worth our attention, because I think NATO, including US, by the way, are actually engaged in a military activity that can be seen as an indicator of for preparations to potential limited military engagement against Russia. Yet again, I will argue that this terminology, limited military engagement, is wrong in my opinion. But I have heard the military experts were using this term, so okay, let's say it. I guess they want to highlight by using this limited engagement terminology to highlight that there's going to be no full-scale exchange between NATO and Russia, but there will be some limited military clashes. I'm afraid one way or another, but we are getting very close to exactly that point when NATO will escalate on such a level then that we might actually see limited or a local scale, let's say, clashes between Russian and NATO troops, which is extremely dangerous, isn't it? Because we are talking about major nuclear superpowers that can actually obliterate the whole world, by the way, many times over, right? But I'm afraid we have enough indicators that NATO is actually preparing for this, and that's why US is deploying its nuclear weapons into UK, and also the US have sent its biggest warship, a USS Gerald Ford, this carrier strike group, into Mediterranean, and this is also can be seen as a signal or the indicator that something is about to happen. NATO is preparing for a big provocation. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I am wrong, and that nothing will happen. But unfortunately, there is a very little room for optimism at this point. So we should, keep in mind all these developments and pay more close attention to it, because yet again, we know what happened when Trump issued their ultimatum to Iran after 60-day ultimatum. After that, we actually see military engagement, and couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago that was, isn't it, on 14th of July, Trump issued ultimatum against Russia, 50-day ultimatum. And I would not be surprised at all if Western so-called elites are so out of touch with reality, so crazy, by the way, that they might actually provoke limited scale or whatever scale, but they might actually provoke direct clashes with Russian militaries. Extremely dangerous situation, isn't it? To continue, dear friends, let me give you a few more news on some important topics. I shared on my Telegram and Twitter X page pages this report that Russian and Iranian defense ministers met in Moscow. Iranian side said cites as below. So and Nasir Zadeh discussed closer cooperation in the defense and military fields. I remind you, dear friends, that the day before yesterday, Russian president had a meeting with the closest trusted ally of Iran's supreme leader, who was visiting Moscow. And there are obviously details of the talks we're not going to know. Just some major statements were made about talk itself. Now we have this report about talks between Russian and Iranian defense ministers. Also, I remind you, dear friends, that yesterday in Caspian Sea, combined military exercises has begun between Russian and Iranian Caspian flotillas, right? Forces there. So cooperation is really very close. And today, by the way, on 22nd of July, Iran will hold a trilateral meeting with Russia and China, which is also important. We know we have seen quite a number of reports about talks between Russian and Iranian leaders, military, political leaders. I'm quite sure Iran is engaged there in the same way with China. And now we have this report that trilateral talks are going to take place. And I think Moscow and Beijing are engaged with Iran to assist Iran, basically, to be as much ready for self-defense as possible, because I'm quite sure, by the way, if I see, if in my reading of the big picture, I see inevitability of provocation of the regional war, that globalists are so interested, then I'm quite sure, think tanks that are providing analytics to, Moscow and Beijing, they know this also, and obviously neither Russia, neither China want to see any regional war in the Middle East or any escalation, any further escalation, especially when it comes to navigation in the Persian Gulf and through Hormuz Strait. And that's exactly the topic that globalists are interested in. They want to provoke regional war on religious and ethnic lines, so that they be able to shut down navigation or disrupt navigation big time in Persian Gulf and Hormuz Strait for a long time, so that their hope is that this way they will harm China, significantly, if China is cut off from this major source of energy. And so it is understandable that Russia and China don't want any further escalation to happen in the Middle East, and both countries are assisting Iran to be ready for whatever provocations globalists and their allies in the collective West and also Israel might come up with. So today, trilateral talks. So let's see what additional information will come out from these talks. In addition, dear friends, let me give you this report that Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi was interviewed by Fox News, I believe, and he stated once again that as a result of U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, damage was serious, and he is repeating this stuff, he and many other Iranian leaders, on daily basis at this point, almost, and they are playing into ego of Trump, right? Because of course Tehran sees attempts by Israeli regime, Zionists, their globalist allies, to play Trump, right? To play on his ego, and that's why media that are controlled by globalists and Zionists were pushing this narrative that, well, these U.S. strikes were not that effective, and nothing was obliterated, as Trump loves to say, and Iran still has up to 400 kilo of enriched uranium and that kind of stuff. And I think to somehow minimize the threat, Iran is also tries to play on Trump's ego, and that's why Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, is saying that, well, U.S. strikes were effective and everything is destroyed and that kind of stuff. But same time, I don't think this will work, by the way. I mean, globalists are not going to stop. They will continue escalation, and they will try to provoke regional war in the Middle East. They have no reverse gear, and they will continue their activity, their criminal activity in this direction. And that's why Moscow and Beijing are engaged this actively with Tehran to prepare Tehran to defend itself. And also, same time, Moscow and Beijing are engaged with their other regional countries, especially in the Persian Gulf, to make sure that globalists and their allies in the collective West not going to be able to provoke war between regional countries, right? But nevertheless, by the way, Abbas Araghchi, during this interview with on the Fox News, also went to say that Iran will not give up a nuclear enrichment, and he said that Iran invested too much. By the way, Iran invested too much to reach level of expertise that they have right now, that they are able to actually provide their nuclear facilities with enriched uranium to be in a position of, let's say, latent nuclear deterrent, and they're not going to give up this achievement, of course. And Abbas Araghchi was very clear on that, and Trump reacted. By the way. Somewhat this Abbas's play on Trump's ego was somewhat effective, because Trump actually pay attention to his words, and he posted on his Truth Social, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi, on the Iran nuclear sites, damages are very severe, they are destroyed. And Trump added, then, of course, they are, just like I said, and we will do it again if necessary. I mean, Trump continues to act irresponsibly and continues to threaten Iran, by the way, which is not the way presidents should act, right? President should not talk about war, by the way. This lightly, it's not okay, right? It's not okay. But tell this to Trump, by the way. So he's threatening that U.S. will attack again if necessary, whatever that means, necessary. As interviewed by Brett Baer, I mean, he's referring to this interview of Abbas Araghchi on Fox. Fake news CNN should immediately fire their phony reporter and apologize to me and the great pilots who obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. CNN is a major ratings losers, as is MSDNC. He is referring to MSNBC. Okay, by the way, I mean, we have to pay attention. We just have to pay attention to Trump's post, because after all, he's a president of US. Otherwise, I mean, this is, I mean, if some troll on social network is acting like that, I mean, okay, one may argue, I mean, that's what trolls do, but Trump is a president of US and should act a bit more serious, right? But nevertheless, Abbas Araghchi was somewhat successful, at least partially successful. He managed to play Trump, right? Play on Trump's ego. Okay, but it is very unfortunate that U.S. president acting this irresponsibly and threatens other country with attacks. Like, is it nothing, man? It's wrong on so many levels. But, and also when it comes to Trump, by the way, as I said, he's acting like a troll on the internet, and he published on his Truth Social short video generated by AI when Obama is sitting next to him, and then security or service officers are getting in and arresting Obama. This is second time, if I'm not mistaken, when Trump is kind of playing around this topic of arrest of Obama. And who knows, by the way, there is such a chaos in Washington, or at least it seems to me that it's such a chaos there, and such a instability, and so much irresponsible and serious stuff is happening there that maybe Obama really will be arrested. Who knows, right? Anything is possible, and that's why people are arguing that U.S. is going down, by the way, and very rapidly. But nevertheless, also interesting report, which is once again highlights that U.S. political class is in deep trouble, and world is in deep trouble due to that, because U.S. is a still major military powerhouse in this world, right? And we have reports, by the way, that Trump's wife, Melania, was named as the reason for Trump's threats to Russia, right? Many media outlets reported on this matter, that Melania actually influences Trump. I find it difficult to believe, by the way, in these reports, but you share your opinion. What you think? Is this a possibility? I mean, in this particular case, this article is about Republican U.S. Congressman Don Bacon, who suggested that U.S. President Donald Trump's change in rhetoric towards Ukraine was facilitated by his wife Melania. And well, as I said, many Western media outlets report about Melania's role or Melania's influence in political decision-making process in the White House. And the Hills, by the way, is also reporting on that. And this is, if true, by the way, this is too bad, isn't it? Because Melania is not elected to influence anything, right? Trump was elected as to lead the U.S., right? And if Melania actually has a big influence on Trump's behavior, Trump's decision-making process, then that is too bad. That is too bad. In that case, we have to think who has influence on Melania, right? And I'm quite sure some investigative journalists will dig into Melania's biography, and they will, if so, they might find some connections, by the way, between Melania and, I don't know, maybe Israeli secret services, or maybe with some people that are related to World Economical Forum or some globalist entities. Anything is possible, right? Anything is possible. But I'm a bit surprised, by the way. I did not expect that Melania was a Russia hater or the Russophobe, but allegedly she is, right? If she is telling Trump to act tough against Russia and to escalate against Russia, which is tremendously dangerous, by the way. And Tucker Carlson paid a greater volume of attention to this matter of risk of nuclear war during his latest interview with the Bild, isn't it? I definitely recommend that interview. It was it was something spectacular, by the way. Tucker Carlson walked all over this German editor from the Bild. He was hilarious, by the way. But nevertheless, I mean, you tell me what you think, but this is just too bad if Melania actually is playing a role in White House's decision-making process. I don't know what to say on that. RT is reporting that DR Congo and the rebels pledged to sign a peace deal. Well, Trump announced quite a long time ago now, isn't it, that he managed to achieve a peace between DR Congo and rebels there, and also Senegal. But seems like only now some deal being achieved. So Democratic Republic of the Congo and the M23 rebel group, which is affiliated, I believe, with the Senegal, right? And Senegalese forces, if I remember correctly, by the way. So the DR Congo and their M23 rebel group have pledged to sign a peace agreement by August 18, after a month of talks mediated by Qatar and their decades of escalating violence in a Central African nation. And what can I say? If peace will be achieved with the mediation of Qatar or whichever country, by the way, I mean, we can only applaud to that, isn't it? Hopefully this will work out. Also, dear friends, let me give you news that Russia's SG-100 passenger jet completed its first 9-hour flight using 100% domestically made parts, including their PD-8 engines, and there are over 60 foreign companies have been replaced, by the way, since 2018, to be able to build this plane domestically. And this is a big deal because there is only a few countries in this world are capable actually to independently build passenger planes, and Russia is one of them, right? Russia is one of them, and you can imagine, by the way, I mean, over 60 companies since 2008, over 60 foreign companies were replaced by Russian companies, right, to provide their producer of these planes with all the necessary parts, right? And this is a great deal, by the way. This is new jobs, high quality, high paid jobs, high tech jobs, right? And this is a future prospects for Russian aerospace industry. And I'm very happy about these developments. Great news also, dear friends. I remind you that MS21 will enter service soon. There is also test flights going on in regards to MS21, which is also 100% built here in Russia on Russian parts. And also reports are, by the way, that large fuselage transport plane soon may actually also enter the trials. Engines, by the way, engines are a big deal, right? And I'm happy that Russian aerospace industry is managing to rebuild its capabilities that it has during the Soviet era times, by the way. And Russia now is in a position to actually produce passengers planes all alone, right? And I will end news segment, dear friends, on this also important news that and interesting that UK sanctions 135 oil tankers in Russia's so-called shadow fleet. London says this will hammer Putin's energy revenues. You see how these criminals in the leadership of Collective West and so-called media in the West, by the way, constantly using this terminology like Putin's Russia, Putin's this, Putin's that. I mean, they are trying to demonize this person, Putin, not just Russia, but Putin personally. And the question is, I mean, what the hell? Why? Because Putin is much more successful leader as anybody in the Collective West. And this is true, isn't it? And Tucker Carlson during that interview was actually pointing out on that while talking to this German editor from the Bild that what the hell is wrong with you guys? That's what he said, basically. What the hell is wrong with you? Instead of having a criticism of your leaders that are worst ever politicians, right? You are focused on pushing this Russia hate narrative and Putin hate narrative. Why? Is it Putin is guilty that your economies are destroyed, your society is experiencing tremendous issues and social fabric is stretched beyond limits? Is it Putin's fault or it's your fault, your politicians' fault, right? But yet again, man, I guess Western so-called elites are just too desperate to divert attention of the public from domestic issues on something else. And well, usually it's Russia, by the way. Usually for decades and decades and decades, by the way, they are always trying to divert public's frustration towards Russia, right? And to transform this public's frustration into Russia hate. And unfortunately, they are quite successful in that. I mean, it's bad, but I hope I'm wrong, but I think if you conduct some social studies in Germany, in France, in Italy, in UK, if you ask people, probably some 60, 70%, maybe even more, by the way, will one way or another, but demonstrate that they've been indoctrinated in Russia hate, right? Which is unfortunate because we done nothing against them, by the way. I mean, what we have done against our French citizens, I mean, you tell me, or British citizens, by the way, or German citizens. Nothing, by the way. I mean, we don't want relationships between our countries to be hostile. And Russian leadership is very clear on that, isn't it? No one is hiding that we don't not want hostility. We are not looking for a fight. But if we have to, then, well, what can we do in that case, right? So now UK is acting. UK's leadership is acting this crazy. They sanctioned 135 vessels. Who cares, really? And you know what they are calling shadow fleet, by the way, vessels that are not insured by British insurance companies. In insurance business, by the way, London is a major player, right? Major player. And it happened that due to weaponization of Western financial and the banking system, which includes insurance system too, now more and more businesses are doing business without London, right? These vessels are insured, but not in London, and they are not happy about it, I guess, right? So in reality, by the way, there is no shadow fleet. There is no such a thing as a shadow fleet. Or only foreign flagged tankers that don't obey by the Western sanctions, don't obey Western rules, right? That they have to be insured necessarily in London or something. No, they don't, right? They can do whatever they want, as long as they are not, endangering others, right? And these tankers not endangering no one, by the way. So it is desperation. It is desperation on part of Western ruling class, and desperate elements, especially desperate criminal elements, are capable of tremendous actions, tremendously dangerous actions. So we all know that, right? And that's why I think that unfortunately there is a high probability that before come to their senses, before acknowledging that they have lost this proxy war against Russia, Western so-called elites, Western ruling class will escalate with Russia on an unprecedented scale. And I'm afraid this might happen in next 35 days, maybe even before, but possibly after 35 days, when this Trump's 50-day ultimatum will expire or something. And then most likely Russia will have no option but to retaliate, and retaliate strong, so much so that after that retaliation, Western elites will finally come to their senses, and then we will see some real steps towards de-escalation. And dear friends, this is it when it comes to our news segment. Hopefully you did find it informative and interesting. And before community chatter, let me just ask Anya, was there any super chat? I guess there was no super chat or donation during the stream. Annie, was there any super chat? No. Okay, dear friends, then before community chat, let's take 15-20 minutes for a little chatter. Before that, let me just remind you that tomorrow I have to take some technical break for potentially 2 days. I cannot go into details now why, but I will explain it later on. So therefore, tomorrow and maybe day after tomorrow, I will not be able to make updates, but then I will come back. With more programs, of course. And well, that's being said, let's have a little chat. I can see questions from non-Ayam. So question is there anyone any more info on their biolabs in Ukraine? What were they cooking up? Is the Russian Federation monitoring public transportation planes from hostile nations infected insects? Well, I believe every country has some safety measures in place when it comes to transport routes, not just planes, but also vessels and so on. It's a basic stuff, I think. So there should be some measures in place when it comes to U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. I don't know any more than I said yesterday. That was, isn't it, about this topic? Allegedly, majority of the biolabs, from dozens of biolabs that were built in Ukraine by Pentagon, by U.S. militaries, dozens of them were transferred to some African nations. Rumors are that also in Asia and South America. but obviously, I mean, one cannot know for sure, right? This type of activity in many ways are classified, and therefore, on your second question, what they were doing in these biolabs, well, because militaries were engaged, U.S. militaries, right? These biolabs were operating under the umbrella of U.S. Air Force. Uh, you know, what militaries are doing in the biolabs? Logical answer is, some bioweapons, some bioweapons. There was a report, by the way, that through these biolabs and other means, U.S. Militaries were collecting samples of DNAs of people of Russia, different ethnicities, and so on. I don't know what for what purposes. Maybe they are working on a weapon, on a bioweapon that will target some specific genes in the body of their human. I don't know. I'm not an expert in this field, isn't it? But there were reports that actually samples. They were collecting some samples of peoples of Russia, and here, by the way, I mean there are dozens and dozens of different ethnic groups, isn't it, that are creating Russia. So I don't think they were engaged in anything good, by the way, because we are talking about Pentagon, right? When you last time hear that Pentagon did anything good for anybody? It's never happened, right? Never, literally. So it is what it is. Also, another question from Nonayer. What is their American 10-year plan? Is the 10-year plan to release of their bioweapons over Russia? Is Georgia allowing the US to operate in Georgia? Well, I don't know what you mean by 10-year plan. US institutions might have dozens of decade-long plans, right, in dozens of directions, and not just US, by the way. This is classical stuff. It's a standard, right? Certain programs are oriented on decades, right, in the future. When it comes to, yet again, potential use of bioweapons by US, is it a possibility? I think yes. US leadership, US political class, Western political class, and military leaders are acting tremendously responsibly, and so anything is should be expected from them, right? That's why I think humanity is entering probably most dangerous era of its existence, because of the capabilities that these Western so-called elites have, including in terms of bioweapons or weapons of mass destruction, let's say. And on your question of Georgia, if Georgia is allowing the U.S. to operate in the country, Georgian leadership, there was and still is, by the way, at least one biolab, U.S. Biolab in Georgia. Last time I see reports about it was telling that activity in that biolab was decreased significantly, allegedly, but obviously I cannot know for sure. I mean, we should keep in mind, dear friends, that many topics, some 70, 80, 90% of many topics and the programs that US is engaged in is classified, and very little information is actually known. Just some baseline stuff that yes, there is a biolab, right? It's a factual, there is a biolab, US Air Force is engaged there, right, in this bioactivity, and that's about it, what you know. Rest is just your guess, right? And more informed you are, then more informed your guess is. And let's continue, dear friends. As always, capital Q will make it easier to spot the question. Ань, мониторишь, да? Окей. I'm asking my wife. I cannot monitor simultaneously all both platforms, by the way, Rumble and YouTube. I could if StreamYard would show me stickers, super chat stickers, but unfortunately, StreamYard for whatever reason does not show me. So I cannot. I can see comments on a Rumble simultaneously to comments on YouTube, but there is no specific distinguishment of super chat, and that's why Anya, my wife, is helping with that. So Donzugar is asking, Russia is a signatory to genocide convention, so they have their legal right and their obligation to try to stop the Gaza genocide, like Yemen. What's Putin's problem? Well, Russia is trying, isn't it? Russian leadership was very clear in regards to Israeli actions. Now, if you want Russia to get engaged militarily, by the way, I don't think this will happen. I just don't think. I mean, why should we lie to ourselves, right? I don't think Russia will get engaged militarily. But if United Nations will come up with some humanitarian programs, if UN will send some peacekeeping mission there, in that case, Russia may get engaged, right? But when it comes to current situation, position of Russian leadership is very clear and very critical of their actions of their Israeli leadership when it comes to their treatment of civilians in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank, by the way. So when it comes to countries, I said many times before, it's Western countries, isn't it, that actually have leverage over Israel, because Israel is dependent heavily on the weapons and money from the West, from US and other NATO member states. And so it does make all the sense if societies in the West will demand from their government to use this leverage over Israel and actually force Netanyahu's regime to stop this criminal activity. And there are demonstrations, by the way. We should not downgrade the importance of protest movements in the collective West countries. Many people are actually engaged in the protest movements, or we might argue about methods. Some methods may not be acceptable, some might, but nevertheless, many people, by the way, thousands and thousands of people in the collective West countries are actually protesting and demanding from their governments to use their leverage over Israel to force Netanyahu to stop all the crimes that Netanyahu and his regime is committing. But this is, I mean, unfortunately, these protests did not yet have any influence on policies of the Western countries, isn't it? Neither in US or in UK or in France or in Germany. So, which is unfortunate, but Nidish Kumar is asking, Levan, how many seater the passenger plane has that you guys are testing? SSG Superjet, by the way, is I believe up to 100 passengers. MS21, by the way, is a different beast. MS21 is a wide fuselage plane, and it will have, I believe, up to 200, maybe more seats. It always depends on design, isn't it? Some companies may ask Saturn design and high comfort design. In that case, seats will be lesser. Some companies might run these planes on a so-called budgeter. Budget airlines might ask for more seats, less comfort and more seats, and so it always depends on requests from their companies, avia companies that will buy these planes. But Superjet is about 100 passengers, I believe, up to 100, and MS21 is a wide fuselage plane, so it can carry 200 passengers, maybe more potentially. It's a big plane. And I think before end of this year, probably both planes will undergo full testing hopefully, and mass production will begin. That will be great. But information itself, the fact itself that Russian aerospace industry is capable of building domestically, by the way, these passenger planes is something of to be proud of, really. I mean, very few countries in this world are capable of that, because it's dozens and dozens and dozens of companies that are engaged, isn't it, in these projects. And all these companies are Russian companies. Don Boy is commenting, Levan. I love how you like to let steam off. Thank you very much. I guess you mean moments when I'm getting a bit emotional or something. Some members of community do find it funny, those moments. I myself are very critical of me when I'm losing cool and becoming more emotional. But things happen when you are working in real time in live streams. Sometimes you might go off rails, and it might be hilarious to watch from outsider. It might be funny. You may laugh at that situation, and it's all good, by the way, right? I laugh on myself too. I'm well capable of being self-ironic, right? Which is a good stuff, I think. But whenever I go emotional, usually, I'm not happy about myself because of that. But things happened. Interesting question from Harry Honkonen. Could America beat APAC? Could USA beat BlackRock? I mean, this is fundamental questions really at this point. I will say, can US society deal with their APAC or Israeli lobby or Zionist lobby? And could US society deal with the multinational corporations that are running the show, by the way? Together with their APAC and some globalist entities and so on. And I mean, this is fundamental question that U.S. society has to answer. We just, I don't know. I hope they are capable of reclaiming their own country. I hope they will, Americans, and I wish them luck, by the way. It's their country, and they deserve to be in charge of their own country and their own destiny, 100%, as any other people, by the way, in other countries, right? But will they manage to do so? I don't know. Influence of these multinational corporations and all sorts of lobbies is just tremendous. I mean, look what they did to Trump, by the way, in just matter of like weeks. He was one person during the election campaign, and now even diehard Trump supporters are unable to recognize him, right? And are very upset. That's the level of influence that these forces that we are talking about have. So, Nidish Kumar is commenting, Levan, it will take at least 4 years for certification. It's a civilian plane, making it even tough to get certified. I mean, yes, I mean, it takes long. It takes longer. But test flights of these completely domestically built planes are taking place for quite a while now. I mean, this is not the first time this Superjet store took into air. This was our first 9-hour test flight. Before that, there was all sorts of other test flights, right? But nevertheless, I know that this certification program process takes forever, but for good, because we need to be sure that these planes are safe, isn't it? So we cannot complain about that. But nevertheless, I mean, in maybe in 4 years, maybe in 3 years, maybe in 2 years, but whenever these planes will undergo full testing, they will enter service, by the way, and it's a big deal. it's a big deal, by the way, and big win for Russian economy, aerospace industry, and all the people that are working in this field. Yet again, I mean, at this point, the US is capable of building planes domestically, completely domestically. Maybe even not, right? Boeing, for example, is dependent on parts, even from Russia, by the way. Some titanium parts, I believe, until now, has been shipped to US. Airbus is dependent on Russian parts too, right? And Airbus is not a company of one European country; it's a consortium of many European countries, right? So in Europe, none of the countries, neither UK, neither France, neither Germany, none of them are capable to build civilian planes on their own right now. The US can do this, by the way. I have no doubts that even if US will stop buying parts from Russia or Canada, for example, that is also big when it comes to titanium, I think US will manage to build domestically planes. China can do it, by the way, also, and that's about it, right? There is a Breyer planes, right, in Brazil, by the way, but and this is also a big deal, obviously, but this is smaller planes. But nevertheless, Brazil is also on the map when it comes to aerospace industries. And that's about it. Only a couple of countries are capable. I know India also has ambitions in this direction, and hopefully will succeed. But it's a process. It's a long process. Levan, what is South American countries meeting is all about? Any global events discussed? I don't know, Nidisha. I did not pay attention. What I noticed lately in regards to South America is that countries that were traditionally controlled by US and were always pro-US, let's say, opinion, mindset of the people are changing there, and they're surprisingly to me, by the way, BRICS is gaining more and more popularity. Brazil is a BRICS member state, of course. I mean, take a look at the Colombia, by the way. Who would thought that Colombia, that was always hammer of the US, right, in Latin America. Colombia is now kind of distancing itself from the West. Some very tough statements being made by Colombian current leadership, and these countries kind of leaning towards the BRICS too. Who would thought that like a decade ago? No one, right? So things are changing, but yet again, if we see this, Washington also sees, of course. The US neocons see it too, and who knows what kind of provocations they are planning for all the governments in against all the peoples and all the governments in Latin America or in South America to punish them, basically, to do some regime change or to destabilize these countries and so on, to keep under their control. The US is capable of anything, really, right? US political class, by the way. Dan Boy is commenting, Levan, do you think Russia should unite the whole Orthodox православную цивилизацию, Slavic civilization? In Russian, by the way, Orthodox is a православная. I'm Orthodox Christian, я православный христианин, да? That's how it sounds in Russian, православный. In Georgian, it's Martel Madi Debeli. Right? Why in English is Orthodox? I don't know. Because Orthodox to me is associated with the word itself, is associated with some radical movement, right? Orthodox or extremely conservative movement. But nevertheless, that's the word there in English speaking world is used there. Orthodox. And on your question, your friends, should Russia unite whole Orthodox Christianity? Well, it's easy to say than to do, isn't it? Look what CIA and what Vatican, by the way, allies of the Vatican in Orthodoxy, and they have some allies, by the way, unfortunately, like Patriarch of Constantinople, for example, and some others. Look what they did on Kiev-controlled territory, by the way. They divided Orthodox society. Majority of people in Kiev-controlled territory is of course still part of canonic Ukrainian Orthodox Church, right? But unfortunately, many others committed tremendous sin, by the way, when they break out of canonic Orthodox Church and join this some criminal organization that was basically created by CIA and call itself false Orthodox Church, right? And only recognized by in Orthodox world, only recognized by Patriarch of Constantinople, and I'm afraid Greek Orthodox Church also recognized them, which is very unfortunate. But rest of the Orthodox churches did not recognize, right? But nevertheless, Orthodox Christianity is not as united as it might sound. There are some internal issues that churches have to work out. So I just don't see in a foreseeable future any possibilities that Orthodox civilization is united. Idea is good one, by the way, right? But is it realistic to get united? Unfortunately, it does not seem like. But idea is great. We should be united, right? We all are Orthodox Christians. Orthodox Christians, right? And Orthodoxy, by the way, is gaining popularity in the West. Many, especially among young generation, that are frustrated with all these woke elements that bring into Protestant churches in the US or in Europe. And Orthodoxy is even in Catholic Church, by the way, some elements being put in that that are questionable for many people, I guess. And Orthodoxy is definitely gaining popularity in this regard because Orthodox Church is not messing around, by the way. It's not happening. You're not going to see Orthodox Church that will actually allow like same-sex marriages and that kind of stuff, man. It makes no sense, right? So because Orthodoxy is very traditional, one may call conservative. Okay, I have no issue with that. It does gain popularity, and I'm happy about it. But to be united, I don't know. It's a great idea, but it's almost impossible to do at this point. Bulgaria, by the way, majority Orthodox Christians, right? And there should be allies of Russia, for sure. But is Bulgaria ally of Russia? Unfortunately not. Bulgaria has one of the most Russia-hating elites. Romania, by the way, what about Romania? Majority Orthodox Christians, right? But elites are Russia haters and they're completely controlled by the globalists. What about Greece, by the way? Orthodox country, Orthodox society, Orthodox Christians. But elites, political elites, yet again, are tremendous Russia haters, right? And unfortunately, there is some issues between the Greek Orthodox Church and Russian Orthodox Church too. And when there is issues between Orthodox, the sister churches, by the way. This is always a tragedy, always negative stuff, right? But yet again, idea is good, but hardly can be done. Nidish Kumar is asking, Levon, does you have enough trees to print $120 billion? Yeah, that's a good question, man. That's a good question. Well, they're gonna, yeah, good question. Good irony there. And dear friends, if you don't know, in Europe, you're not gonna, almost nowhere in Europe, especially in Western Europe or in UK, by the way, you're not gonna see medieval forest. Practically everywhere, forest is a result of rebuilding, right? Because original forests were just cut down all over the Western Europe. So, and if you see any forester now, it's something new. Levon, does militaries try to develop jets and the fighters which can land on the seas and refueled by destroyers and subs, as aircraft carriers are becoming obsolete? Well, there was ideas in different countries of carrier submarines. By the way, Japan had such an idea during the Second World War, and I believe they even built a carrier submarine. They definitely had the plans on that. So if Japan had such plans, of course, Soviet Union and the US also had such plans, but and in the future, maybe some massive subs will be built to carry planes, but yet again, it will cost tremendous amount of money, and then modern anti-missile weapon systems will make these underwater carriers extremely vulnerable, isn't it? And so, does it worth investment? I think future is in the drones, right? Future of air battles and maritime battles is going to be focused on the drone warfare mainly. When it comes to jet propelled planes that were taking off from the sea, well, probably I guess you know perfectly well that in Soviet Union there were many planes built there that were capable of takeoff from the sea. By the way, there were missile carriers. There were trials on the Caspian Sea. Caspian Monster was the name of one of those planes. I mean, there was projects in place, right? Projects in place. There was test flights even done on many different projects, but eventually there was no mass production of such planes, right? There was even project in Soviet Union to build a massive plane that is takes off from the sea and flies some 3 to 5 meters above sea level. Name of those planes are I forget their specific name for such a design of the planes, and there was some plans in Soviet Union, I believe, to build a massive plane that would carry, that would be carrier, but it only stays on the paper. Soviet Union did not even attempt to build one of such scale. So, and dear friends, if I may, I will end live stream now. Thank you all for your attention. Have a wonderful day, and yet again, dear friends, tomorrow and day after tomorrow, most likely I would not be able to do live streams, but then I will come back and I give you some details. What was this technical pause was related to. Okay, this is it for now. Have a wonderful day and take care.